Are you a telehealth provider or considering starting a virtual practice? Then today's episode is just for you. I'll be covering what to include in your informed consent, my recommendations for technology and platforms to use, as well as the best way to set up your home office so it's appealing and beneficial to your teletherapy clients. You're just going to love these practical tips, so get ready and tune in.
Hey, Christian therapist, are you craving a counseling career that aligns with your faith and actually supports your well being? Welcome to the Prosperous Christian Therapist Podcast. I'm Kimberly Van Hooser, Christian therapist, private practice owner, and business coach for mental health professionals like you. In this podcast, you'll get practical strategies and faith led guidance to help you build a thriving private practice, one that serves your clients well and makes an impact for the kingdom of God. So, what are you waiting for? Grab your notebook and join me for today's episode.
Welcome to the Prosperous Christian Therapist Podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Van Hooser. I'm so glad you're here with me today. If you've been listening to the show and enjoying it, please do me a huge favor and leave me a written review on Apple Podcasts. That's really going to help increase the show's visibility and help other mental health professionals who can benefit find the show. If you're looking for some one-to-one coaching, I am offering a time-limited offer for the month of August where you'll receive a great discount on your initial coaching consultation. So if you're interested in that, please send me an email at kimberly@kimberlyvanhooser.com. I will go ahead and leave my email in the description and the show notes below, but I'd love to hear from you. Today, I'll be sharing some things that I've learned since being a telehealth provider that I think will be really helpful for those of you who might be considering starting a virtual private practice, or even for those of you who are already established with your telehealth practice that you might not have thought about before. I actually started offering telehealth prior to COVID when it became so popular. At the time, I was living in Los Angeles and planning to move to Arizona. And I was praying about what to do with my practice because I had been established in person in California and doing fairly well there. And then with this move, I was praying about should I just close my practice doors and start another job for an agency when I get to Arizona? Should I start a new private practice? What am I supposed to do? And I really felt the Holy Spirit impress upon me that I should consider taking my practice virtual. And you can imagine how grateful I was when COVID went into effect and we had to shelter in place, and every other therapist out there was scrambling to try to figure out how to take their therapy sessions virtual. Of course, nowadays telehealth is much more common. It seems like the majority of therapists that I meet offer telehealth almost 100%, or it's a big chunk of their practice. So many of you listening might feel like you already have a lot of the tools you need to know how to have a successful virtual practice. But I'm just going to share some of my own wisdom and experience that I have gained along the way that I think would have been helpful for me as I was starting out. So, first off, we're going to talk about what you need to make sure you include in your consent paperwork if you are going to be offering telehealth. There are unique risks and benefits for telehealth that are different from in person therapy. So, it's really important to make sure that you are informing your clients of what those are before you get started with a therapy session. I actually have a separate informed consent that is specific to telehealth. Even if I have a client who's specifically requesting just in person therapy sessions, I still have them sign my telehealth informed consent because chances are down the road, it's quite possible that they might request a virtual session and then you already have their consent on file. So, whether or not you have a completely separate informed consent for telehealth or you just include it in the part of your general informed consent, it's really important that you are making sure that you're at least addressing it. Be aware that different states might have different requirements for what is needed to be included in your informed consent for telehealth. So, just make sure that you are checking with your board and aware of what those requirements might be so you can include them. It's important to include things like the risks and benefits for engaging in telehealth, as well as what your process would be in case of technology failure. So, really think through what your policy would be if, for whatever reason, you were experiencing technology failure on your end as the therapist. How would you proceed? As well as what will you do if the client is experiencing technology failure? That also will play a role into like your cancellation policy. Are you still going to charge if your client has met with you for most of the session and then they're experiencing some Wi-Fi difficulties? So take some time to think about that policy and make sure that you include that in your informed consent. Another thing to consider is making sure that you communicate the importance of a client's location during telehealth. For one, when you start a session, you must know their exact physical location. That's generally needed in case of emergency, so you know where to send emergency services to people. but it's also important in terms of state licensure laws. So they need to be located in a place where you are legally permitted to conduct telehealth. I've had clients jump on a virtual therapy session before, and then I find out that they're somewhere like Mexico or another country or another state where I'm not legally, technically permitted to offer therapy. So I've had to wrap up the session and say, we have to wait till you get back. And all of that can be avoided if you make sure you're clear and upfront with clients that they must be located within one of the states that you're licensed in or permitted to do telehealth in order to meet for a therapy session. I would also highly recommend including in your informed consent that your client is not allowed to be participating in a therapy session if they're in a moving vehicle. Part of this is just the very practical side of things that you are not able to send emergency services to them if you don't know where they're located. And how can you know their exact physical location if they are in a moving vehicle and it's constantly changing? It's also because when a client is driving a vehicle, it's usually pretty highly distracting. I get distracted as a therapist because they're not able to really focus on what they're talking about in therapy. And then the client is also distracted because they're just trying to make it safely home. Usually, when I've had this become an issue, it's when a client is running late for a session and they don't want to miss any time. But what I will always do if they call me from a moving vehicle is just remind them of the policy. And I ask them to just call me when they get home, or if they're able to pull off and find a private, secure location, then I will agree to have them call me back from that location and I'll do the therapy session there. It's also important to make sure that you include in your informed consent what your expectations are for a telehealth session. And I think by nature of virtual therapy, in a way, it's made people so comfortable, which is a good thing. We want our clients to be comfortable. But sometimes there's a risk that they don't take into account how to respect what the therapy session is. This will play a role in how much they gain from therapy. And we really want to be setting up our clients to be as successful as possible in our therapy sessions. So I'll give you some examples of some of the expectations that I set with my clients before agreeing to do telehealth. I make sure that they know that they need to be in a quiet, distraction free environment if possible for their therapy sessions. So that means a room where they can be alone, they can close a door, they're not worried about being overheard, there's not dogs or children running through the room. And I know sometimes we can make some exceptions and have some grace, especially if we're working with busy moms or a mom of a newborn baby. And sometimes it's okay to have those distractions come up. But in terms of best practice, making sure that they do have a space where you're actually going to be able to get some therapeutic work done. I also include a statement in my informed consent that clients must be appropriately dressed for a therapy session. And this actually came about from COVID days where people, I think, were just so comfortable that they were felt free to jump on telehealth calls with me, even if they were basically in their underwear. And once more, while I'm glad that my clients feel comfortable, I think there's a level of them respecting the time and recognizing that it is something that holds value and is something serious. They wouldn't show up to an in person therapy session in their underwear, most likely. So I think it's something that helps them convey the appropriate attitude towards their therapy sessions that will help the therapy itself become much more productive when they're seeing the value in it. So these are just some areas that I didn't think to put in my informed consent before I started telehealth and have since made some adjustments that might be beneficial for you to consider. Next, we're going to briefly cover what technology you might need in order to do telehealth. You really don't need a lot to get started. I have my laptop and I have my secure video platform. I would highly recommend that you use either a desktop or a laptop for your sessions because it just looks a lot more professional and also I think is a lot less distracting for both yourself as a therapist and also for your client. I've had to use my phone before when my laptop has been acting up, and it just gets annoying trying to position your phone in the right way. Sometimes it falls over in session. So it's really just best to set yourself up with something that is stable. You have the right angle figured out already, and it won't be interrupting your sessions. There are a lot of great telehealth platforms that you can use. I personally use Simple Practice and have been fairly happy with that. They've also made a lot of improvements on it in the past several years. So I do believe while it started out as an added cost when I first started using it, that now it is included in whatever plan you might use for Simple Practice. I'll go ahead and drop a sign up link for you in the show notes below, and that should give you 1 month free. And if you do end up signing up for a paid subscription, you will get a $200 account credit after using it for 3 months. So feel free to check that out. I also, when I first started, began using Doxy.me, which they have a great free version. I still use that as a backup today in case Simple Practice ever has any issues. And Doxy.me will allow you with the free version to see someone in one other location. So that's the only thing to keep in mind. If you do see couples who are often in different locations at the time that you meet with them, or if you are offering groups, that you would have to have a paid subscription for Doxy.me. Regardless of which telehealth platform you choose, it's important to make sure that it is a confidential version. I've had some people argue that if they're technically not a HIPAA covered entity, which could be the case if you're in private practice and not billing insurance, but you'll want to confirm with a lawyer, that then they don't need to follow HIPAA compliancy. But the truth is, we are required to follow methods for confidentiality. We're responsible for protecting the confidentiality of our clients. So I think it's important to make sure that that includes our meeting areas as well too, including virtual therapy. So it's definitely worth it. And I think not something to negotiate with by using some sort of free version of Zoom that's not HIPAA compliant or using FaceTime and things like that. So just make sure that you're covering yourself in that way and providing the best service for your clients. You may want to consider having a headset as well. It's something I don't really use because typically when I'm doing therapy sessions, I'm in a private location. No one can overhear me. I haven't had any issue with clients saying that they're unable to hear me if I'm not wearing a headset with a microphone. So I'm just able to use my laptop with a webcam. Make sure you have a working webcam. Make sure that your microphone is picking up sound effectively so clients can hear you and see you. And if you're working in an environment where, I don't know, maybe your kids are home and they're upstairs and they might not be able to hear what's going on in the therapy session, but it's possible that some noise could be transferred across to your client, it might be worth it to invest in a headset with a microphone in order to kind of minimize that background noise and make sure that you're heard loud and clear. Okay, so next let's talk about some of the fun stuff, how you can have your virtual office look pretty and be inviting to clients, even if they're not coming to you in person. This is something that I used to think was just kind of common sense. Of course, you're going to want this lovely environment and background behind you. But as I have continued my work as a therapist, have discovered that not everyone always follows the same methods, which is okay. But it's also important for me to bring to your attention, if you're not thinking about it, what are some small things really that you can do in order to be portraying yourself as someone who is professional, as someone who cares about what they do and values and honors the therapy. And that's really going to translate into how your clients experience the work that they do with you and lead to many more referrals if you are honoring this. First off, we do have that responsibility to make sure that the environment we are meeting clients in, even if it's over telehealth, is confidential, it's private. No one else can overhear our therapy sessions that we're conducting from our end. We ask our client to also respect that, so we need to make sure that we are also following suit as therapists and providing a safe space for people. It's also important to think about and be aware of what is in the background. What is the client seeing when they're looking at you? They can see a lot behind you, and maybe it's in a part of your house where they can basically see like the ginormous living room or something. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does make it feel less safe and less confidential. So that's just something to consider as you're setting up, making sure it's in an area of the house or wherever you're meeting that people could actually feel like they're coming to a private office. Even if they're just showing up virtually, that's going to lead to a sense of comfort for them. If you have a lot of mess or clutter in your space, make sure that it's not visible to the client. I am definitely guilty and responsible for having gigantic stacks of paper right underneath my desk. And if I was in my in person office space, there's no way I'd let that mess be in there, but I just make sure that my clients can't see it from the camera. For my office where I do most of my telehealth sessions, it is in my house, and I have it set up in the background with a nice little cozy chair and a shelf with a bookshelf. And it's something that looks very much like what a therapy office would look like if someone were to show up in person. So even though I don't conduct in person therapy meetings in my home office, I like it to look as if I could. because I think that just kind of translates to the client as they're showing up, that it feels comfortable and feels inviting to them, where they feel like they could almost envision themselves being in that office and sharing with me. And that just makes the sessions feel more connected. I am not a fan of the virtual Zoom backgrounds that people will sometimes use. I know telehealth through Simple Practice has also a feature where you can use kind of like a virtual background that goes behind you. So it covers up whatever your actual environment you are in and provides a nice little backdrop. The reason why I don't like those is because a lot of times they're kind of glitchy. So if your head moves around a lot, then it's kind of like sometimes you get covered up by it. It's spotty. You can tell that it's a virtual background. And I think it's just distracting. So I'm a fan of not using that, of actually setting yourself up to do telehealth in a space where the actual environment behind you looks inviting and looks therapeutic to people. If you're needing to conduct a session in a different place and it just happens to look super tacky behind you, probably not the end of the world, but it is distracting, I think, to clients. As you're setting up your space for where you're going to be conducting your therapy sessions virtually, I think it's always helpful to envision how it would feel if you were your client. So think about, as a client, if you were to be showing up to your first therapy session, what might you expect or hope for? What would make you feel most comfortable and safe based on what you're seeing in front of you? It's important to consider things like the angle of the camera and the lighting. Not that you have to look perfect, but if you are sitting in a dark corner and your client can't really see you, that's not really going to build a foundation for trust. I think this portion of setting up a virtual therapy practice is actually really fun. You get to kind of create the space that you want your clients to experience. And especially for those of you who might be renting or sharing office space with someone, you might not have as much control over the environment that you might if you happen to have a home office. So just let yourself have fun with it. Just be mindful of the small things that you can do that might make a client feel just a little bit more safe, secure, connected from their very first meeting with you. Hopefully, this episode gave you just a few more things to consider that you might not have thought about already. That will just help you feel like you have set yourself up for success for a virtual private practice. I'm so glad that you took time to listen today. Once more, if you're enjoying this podcast, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whichever platform you are listening on. I would really appreciate it. I'd also love to support you in any way that I can. So if you're interested in doing a one-to-one coaching session with me, just to get a little bit more clarity on what your practice is needing right now, ways that you can improve, or any questions that you might have really in starting a private practice, feel free to reach out to me. I also do offer a free Facebook community. So if you have just general questions and you want some free coaching and support, I welcome that in my Facebook group. I'll go ahead and leave a link to that in our show notes below. But I thank you so much for being here with me today, and I look forward to having you join me again in the future. If you found value in today's episode, would you leave a written review on Apple Podcasts? It helps other faith-led clinicians like you find the show. And don't forget to join my free Facebook community, Start and Grow Your Private Practice as a Christian Therapist, where you'll join other clinicians for encouragement, accountability, and free tips and support. See you there.